Okay.
Everybody, it's a little 1 minute after 8. I think it's time to get rolling with this. We're going to keep it fairly casual as we have the last couple of weeks. And if you have questions, just let us know, wave, and we'll acknowledge you or write it into the chat, and we'll get to you on that. All right. If you could keep your mics on mute, unless you want to interject, that would be great. It'll just help the flow of the meeting go. I'm going to start out with a couple of things as we're looking for the last couple of weeks. Going into Ford Field is very different for some of your kids. And there's a couple of things that you may want to think about putting into your rehearsals. There are going to be 2 sets of hash marks on the field. You'll have the pro hashes and you'll have the high school hashes. And you're going to want to make sure that you let your kids know about that. On my practice field, I had both sets of hashes painted on the field. So we rehearsed with them all year long. You know, you may want to get out there and put some tape down, or, you know, get some spray paint and paint that on your field for the next couple of weeks of rehearsal to get you ready for championships. There's also on the front half of the field, the back half of the field, there's a tick mark that's going to be at the 14-step mark. So halfway between the sideline and the hash marks. So tell your rookies, especially because they've never been in there, and that's a double rookie class this year, that that they need to be aware of that as they're going into that. And I'm going to reinforce something that I said the first meeting, because I think it needs to be reinforced. There is effect in clarity. So the more that you can clean things up, the more you're going to be rewarded for both execution and effect. So in the last 2 weeks, that would be a pretty huge goal, you know, that I think that everybody should have on their radar. So I'm going to hand it off to Juno. Juno's going to introduce our guest tonight, and we're going to go from there. Juno.
Hey, great. Hi, everybody. Good to see everybody again. Yeah, I'm going to be real quick since I did Judge Jennison's show yesterday. I got to see the whole basically the whole West Side was there. So, you know, I just want to encourage people, you know, we've had a couple of clinics like before this, like I would go back to the Matt Harloff clinic, you know, I go back to the Starnes clinic, you know, those clinics that we did where we didn't have seasons, because they're really relevant to what's going on, because we didn't have seasons for 2 years, or Mike, you know, the Mike Turner or a William Chumley thing. So, you know, go back and use those things as well. But like I said, I'm going to keep mine brief. We asked some people to send information back to us, and I'm going to let Blair handle that later on. So it give you a little bit more of current feedback of what, you know, what's going on here locally now. You know, we were kind of telling you what's going on nationally, the issues that everyone's kind of having. There's lots of bands that have COVID, kids missing. So, you know, don't feel bad about that. We see the holes and all that. We understand what's going on. You know, just like you're going to hear some of the things repeated that we've said already, which is a great thing because we're all kind of on the same page. And I would reinforce just what Chuck said about the performance quality. So important. When you get into the dome, just understand things that might be covered up are not going to get covered up in the dome. There's no hiding in that place. So do the best you can, and then, you know, just keep performing at the best quality you can. And I'm going to pass it, I think, over to Blair first, and then Blair maybe pass it on.
Yeah, it sounds good.
Okay.
So as Juno referenced, we did a little bit of research with and spoke to the judges that have been on the panels visually for the last couple of weeks, and got some feedback about, you know, what they were seeing and what, you know, some advice moving here in the last couple of weeks towards our championships. I can tell you that the information that we've been getting from them is something that I've seen everywhere. It's not unique to Michigan. I just did 38 bands in Indiana. Most of those bands were the size of our flight, some flight 3s, but mostly 4s and 5s. So smaller bands, and they all have the same kind of problems, whether it's COVID related, smaller numbers. You know, the shows got completed late in the season. So some of the information we got back, and I thought it was great, was talking about how to address the second half of your program. What we're seeing a lot of is pretty complete, detailed first half or first 3 quarters of a program. And then you get into that last part of the program that maybe you just got on the field a week ago. And the feedback we were getting is when you go into the rehearsals, think about rehearsing from the back of the show front, just so you're putting more reps in, more attention to detail in what's happening in the latter half of the program. Because typically, from a judge's perspective, we comment on what we see, but you might start hear comments about, some of the quality that I saw early in the program, I'm seeing these deficiencies kind of pop up now, and it might be related towards, fatigue, or it could be related to something that's newer to them. So they're more exploring the responsibilities or the performing. So, I would look at looking at the back half of the programs now primarily. Second thing is, we have 2 weeks for our championships. Don't necessarily think about it as what happens between now and this Saturday. Think of it long term. You have 2 weeks, so you may have 4, you may have 6 rehearsals depending on your situation. You may have 2 depending on your situation. But think about it: what can I get done in 2 weeks, and then set a plan and a course of action to get those things done as best you can. I think if you think of, we have to be this good by Saturday, then you may miss the opportunity to have something develop a little bit. It may take 2 weeks because you're so intent on something that's immediate. Another thing that came up a lot with the judges was, don't forget about your fundamentals. Go back and, from a visual standpoint, go back and spend a little bit of time doing a block, going back, talking about your posture, talking about your technique, just to get them a little bit re-engaged in that. Because we're struggling so much right now to finish shows and to clean shows that we forget a little bit about the technique. And the technique is, in the end, what's going to carry us through, those responsibilities. And most everything else that they talked about were things you hear on your commentary every day about, consistency from member to member. We got a lot of comments about, you can tell that there's a larger, there's the haves and have-nots as far as a bigger freshman or younger class, and it's more 50-50 than it used to be, more 60-40. So you can see some younger members out there, a bit more of them. Don't forget about them. Don't focus all on the experienced ones. Go back and spend some time in some positive feedback with those younger ones, because not only are they you need to have them develop a little more in the next 2 weeks, you also are thinking of long term. Those are your leaders for next year and the year after. So other than that, like I said, most of it is very basic. Big thing with color guards, if there's, any color guard people on here, is making sure that they stay engaged performing wise as they go through transitions, coming to the front, changing equipment, going on back onto the stage. Make sure that they stay engaged, stay expressive, and think about those with the same kind of detail as you would your major moments on the field. So, but other than that, I'm going to turn it over to Dave, and then Dave will introduce our guest here tonight. So thank you.
Okay. So yeah, just very briefly, regarding just the next 2 weeks, obviously people are talked about looking, not just weekend to weekend, but from here on out. I think one of the big things, and I've talked with, several directors about this, I also discussed with some of the groups that I'm consulting with, is that the weather, I like to plan for the weather. That's one of the things I always did as we get to this part of the season. You need to make sure that you have a plan A and a plan B. So if you're like tomorrow, we all know that there's a 100% chance of rain. So, if for some reason you get a break and you can get out to the field, you have an A game, an A rehearsal, you have a B rehearsal with what you can do inside. And there's still a lot that you can do musically, visually, indoors, inside. Even if you're not moving, if you can get into the gym, even in the band room, there are moments that all bands have right now where it may be a visual and musical interactive moment where there's a lot going on. Set a makeshift form. If you got enough space in the gym to set it up properly, set it up, rehearse that a couple of times. You're still going to have a little bit of echo, which actually may help you 2 weeks down the road for Ford Field. But just, don't think day to day with your rehearsals. Plan it out. That way, the last thing we want for you, and especially your students, is to have any sense of panic. I think that's one of the things, you should be as relaxed as possible. Obviously, these last 2 weeks are always a stressful time of the season. The nice thing is everyone is going to be performing in Ford Field in 2 weeks. There's nobody this year that's going to be on the outside looking in. So you've got that, you've got that finality of the season, but really just making sure that you plan accordingly. And that's my biggest thing. Look at your strong points, tweak those. But again, from the back to the front, because obviously most of the stuff that we're seeing is the kids start losing steam once they get to the closer, because it's the freshest material. And the last thing we want, is them to be run down. But also, don't forget to look at your opener, at least tweak a few things, because that's, if you haven't touched it in a while, go back, do a run or two just to kind of get it back in their fingers and feet. But with that, I want to turn things over right now to Wayne Dillon. And if you're not familiar with him, he's been, involved in all aspects of the activity for decades. And, he's judged my groups numerous times and always had just phenomenal information and feedback. So what I'm gonna do right now is just turn things over to Wayne.
I appreciate it. And I appreciate being here, folks, and getting a chance. I was talking to Chuck earlier and I said, I wish more associations would do this. I think it's a fabulous idea, and what a great way to just bring the whole community of your circuit together and just share the experience, especially coming out of what we just came out of. And I think it's fabulous, and I commend you on doing this. Speaking of that, when the judges go up, when I was chief judge at the show this weekend in South Carolina, and we talked to the judges before, remind them of some basic things of subcaption integrity, but we also talk about, a tone that you would speak with. You're still going to do your job, but you went through COVID like the bands went through COVID, like the kids went through COVID, like the instructors and the directors went through. So there is an awareness, and I want to first just say that you realize that regardless of what panel is going to see you, those discussions are being held, and the judges want you to be great. They really want you to play well and march well and spin well. They really have an expectation, especially knowing what you've been dealing with. They're there for you. They're going to try to give you as many points as humanly possible. So they make the kids aware of that. So they're kind of going in with this sense of there's an anticipation of this to be your best celebration. Enjoy the day. You guys are going to Ford Field. What a great facility that is. Yeah, can it be scary? Absolutely. If kids have never been in there, it could be a little intimidating, but it's where they see their professional football team play on Sundays and Mondays. So I think for them to go in and to kind of be intimidated, they're going to have their own feelings, but part of your job and your staff's job is going to get them to get to a place where can they enjoy that experience? Can they enjoy those 7 or 8 minutes and the work that they've put in? And that's a lot on you to create an environment where they can get to that space. And so I challenge you to do that for sure. What else do I have? I think Chuck nailed it. Let's talk a little bit about nuts and bolts. Clarity. I think that's kind of it, right? Especially inside of a dome where you have sort of a different acoustical environment, right? It's not quite like outdoors, and the sound is different. The sound bounces around differently. So the importance of watching the drum major. You've been talking about watching the drum major all year from band camp. So now remind the kids, because now as they get more comfortable, they look around, they're checking out things over here and checking out their dots and where they're going. And maybe you have to remind them a little bit of, remember the drum major, that's your common denominator. And when it starts getting hairy and when you're starting to see some funky things that you've not heard, remember, that's a fundamental skill of just finding that drum major. Now, granted, if the battery's right behind you, yeah, you put your ear into that, but remind them of those types of things. It would be great to go inside an indoor facility to practice this week, wouldn't it? But probably most of you wouldn't have that luxury. But you can certainly talk about if you've had that experience of what that might be like. So let's talk a bit more just fundamentals, tuning. I remember when I taught drum corps, I was with the cadets and the Boston Crusaders. We would go to San Antonio and it'd be 185 degrees on the blacktop, and we'd have to go inside where it was 72. And we were trying to figure this thing out. And we did everything. We used to send tuning groups we had like a deal. If I gave Tony DiCarlo a cigar, he'd let a tuning group sneak in the back door and go and get their horns to that temperature. And then he'd relay the information back to the horn arc, and we would set the horns because we had markings on our instruments. So they would kind of, do that. I think what you don't want to do, because you're the opposite, is not going to be hot. You're going to be cold, right? When you go to your championship. So you probably don't want to, you got to push the slides in when it's cold. We all get it. But there's really no need to do that. I'd probably just have the kids know what 72 looks like on their horn. I mean, we should know that. We play there in that band room most days, right? Every day. So that's what they need to remind themselves of. And you need to remind yourself of that's where the environment they're going to go into, right? So don't get too hung up with the tuning outside thing. Just know what's 72 going to be like for their instruments when you get inside. And if you've got another method of getting that to happen, perfect. Let's do that. If you haven't already, you want to think probably about the tuning of your percussion, because things like if you have some real loose sounding bass drums that are really resonant, that's going to create some big sounds. Also, so talk to your percussion people about that. How are you going to kind of dial that in? So those types of sounds, if you have scoops on the snares and things like that, how that might impact indoors. Cymbals, right? Suspended cymbals. And now it's not like the old days, right? Everything's amplified now. Sometimes I'll talk about shotgun mics in a second, but I mean, keyboards are amplified, right? So if sometimes cymbals, like a China cymbal or any kind of suspended cymbal, can really be picked up. So if you have one of those racks where you have like 8 cymbals on the suspended cymbal roll in the ballad leading to the big chord, you've got to consider those things, because it's going to take on its own identity as far as sound and frequency inside the dome that you might not have heard before, if that's a new experience for you. If you're using shotgun mics, okay, this is a pet peeve for a lot of evaluators. And I think a couple things are happening with shotgun mics. If you don't know what they are, they're those mics that people set up on the front boundary, and they're to pick up different events as the show goes on. Sometimes people leave them on the whole show, right? Which can be problematic sometimes, because as we know, it's a marching band. Stuff moves around, snares come near the front. Third clarinets come near the front. So we got to be careful that it's there to pick up a specific event. It may be the woodwind feature, right? If it is the woodwind feature, right? Is it EQ'd? Did someone EQ the setting? Did you use MainStage if you're that kind of program, or is someone just on an iPad moving it around? Is it EQ'd for a characteristic woodwind sound, or is it just turned on? Right. So think about those types of things, because those things can really impact what Chuck said at the start, clarity. Because I really think if you're upstairs and you're listening to music, that's what you're really listening for. Did this group work out clarity? Think about your concert band for a second. When you're working on that concert band piece and it's got like a polyphonic texture, one of the first things you got to do once the kids learn their notes and can play together is to bring out what the main idea is, right? And then you have to take a look at the other textural situations, and they have to be there. You got to hear them, but you got to hear the main thing, the main idea, the main melody. So it's not just clarity vertically, it's clarity horizontally, it's clarity texturally. So, and the kids need to be aware of that too. So whatever you can kind of continue to do as far as clarity that way of all those different planes I just mentioned, I think that's the name of the game. All right, so what else do we have? Let's talk a little bit about this rookie class. It's a different class. We've never had so many rookies coming in to the end of the season. And I think someone made a great point. Kids that were like sophomores are all of a sudden thrown into, they're now the top of the heap. Like they are the main leaders. So keep communicating with those folks. I'm sure you've been communicating with them and talking about, and Blair mentioned about the idea of, it's not just ending in 2 weeks. This is a process. It has to be a process. Otherwise the expectation can be flawed for us, right? We have to see that we didn't have this for a while and now we get it back. We have to look at it over time. It's maybe continuing past the 2 week into next year and the year after, so we can build the thing back to what what you've seen and what you're used to. So the leadership part of that is crucial. We continue to talk to the kids, to get them as part of the goal and understanding what we're trying to do, that this isn't just like a couple of weeks and then we're done type of thing, that this is ongoing. Celebrate them, celebrate their small steps leadership wise. When you start to notice, whoa, I've never really seen this person kind of come out of their shell that way, and they're helping this young person. Because you know what happens at the end of the season, kids get on each other, don't they? They start, hey, he's not doing that. What he didn't step off right. No. And I think the more we communicate, the more we set the expectation of what this thing is, and this is an ongoing process. And I think those kids will fall into line. And then there's a sense of helping. Let's help each other out. Let's do this community like you all set up with this conference call. Let's bring this thing together and let's work this out as a community. So I think those are some of the things I think you need to consider going into this last little bit of your season. But again, it's like an imaginary finish line. You know that if you've been teaching, even more than a few months, you know that this thing is totally an imaginary finish line, because the second this ends, the next thing starts. It might have already started for you. I remember when I was, teaching the high school, I've already been doing my jazz band. Jazz band's running the race too. So when the marching band race ends, the jazz band race never ends. It's this imaginary finish line. And I think if the kids see it that way, they're going to have an easier time with it as well.
Cool. So do we have any questions from anyone tonight? Brandon, go ahead and unmute and let's hear it.
Hi there. So I was at Jenison yesterday with Allegan Bands, and we had a absolutely fabulous rehearsal the day of. Got like 2 good blocks in. Kids were on fire. Honestly, had our best show by a long shot. Kids were stoked about it. I was stoked about it. And I'm pretty sure I told all the kids the right things. But when we got to the award ceremony, we took 6th place out of 6. We only improved by 1 point. And they're like, man, we worked our tails off. We only got 1 point. And I told them, and I'm pretty sure, like I said, the right things to them was, we had our best show. That's what matters. We feel good about our show. That's what matters. We can't control anyone else, so we don't have to worry about the score at all. And then lastly, I was like, well, our scores were kind of inflated because last week there were only 2 bands in Flight 4. This week we had a full 6. So I told them all these things. They seem to feel a little bit better, but they're all just a little bit like, oh man, we just wanted more. So despite all those things I told them, wondering what else you would have told your band if they had come to you with those grievances.
Well, the first thing, Brandon, you're telling your kids all the right things. Sometimes we can't quite get inside their bodies and their brains and control what they think, even though we are modeling it the best we can. Here's the one thing the judges don't know about you, Brandon. They don't know your path. They don't know what that band started with. They didn't know because it's not in your liner notes. No one's told them. All we see is you in your uniform and you doing your thing. So we could never, ever evaluate that, all of that, what that is. We don't know where you started and what it took you to get to where you got to. Only you know that. And so you have to manage that to the best of your ability and always get the kids to appreciate there's a whole realm of this stuff outside of the 7 minutes where you get a number. And I'm gonna say this to you. Sometimes those numbers are kind of arbitrary. Anyone that's judged knows what I'm saying, right? So I'm not saying that you kind of dismiss it and it's not important, but there's what your program, Brandon, is way more important than my adjudication. Right, your program and the health and longevity of your program is way more important than any number. The experiences that you're giving your kids, the feeling of unity and community, and what your administrators think of you, that's way more important than any number I could ever put down for you.
Brendan, I got 2 things to add to what Wayne said. The first thing is your score did go up. I'm going to tell you frequently at this show in the season, the numbers go down from the previous weekend because that's just the show dynamics and that's how the numbers played out. So the fact that your numbers went up is a good thing. Now it was a small increase, but it did. So there was improvement. And then the second thing that I would say is in listening to the commentary, was the commentary more complimentary than the previous week's commentary?
I think 4 of the 6 judge tapes. Yes.
Okay. So, I mean, that's the commentary that you get is the most important thing, not as important as the number. So the information that I always looked at a show as I got 6 new staff members for a day. So I'm going to get as much information out of those new staff members as I can. Okay. And I listen to those tapes just to take every possible nugget and add those guys to my staff for the day. So if you can, hone in on some of those things and pass some of those things on to your students and tell them about the commentary that you got and the positive things that they said about your group. Okay. And I bet if you talk to your kids, they would all say, yeah, we felt great about this performance, especially comparatively. And then just really dwell on that, about how they feel about it, because that's the most important thing, how they felt about what they did.
Yep. And I'll jump in for a second. You got to remember, and telling the kids, where did they start this journey at? You kind of shared this whole experience with us for the last 3 weeks, and I really appreciate that, to see the other side of what's going on. And you remember how frustrating, how you weren't sure what was going on. I can tell you right now, you seem very confident to me, which is a fantastic thing. That's going to transfer to the students as well, so it's only going to get better. And remember, we're just on a journey. You still got a couple more weeks in that journey. And that's what I would say to the kids.
Yeah, I liked your judge tape a lot last night, Juno. So thank you for that feedback, because I'm really excited about that.
Thank you, Brandon.
And Brendan, take all the information that these men have said, and it all is, great stuff. And the direction that you have already led your kids into it, and how you had them, look at that show, and what you've told them is totally on point. But have them just take the energy that they have coming off of yesterday and move it forward. Move it in a progressive way. Stay proactive and stay positive. We have them stay energized and say, whatever your thoughts were about yesterday, that's fine, but that was yesterday. Now move forward, and how can we grow from here? How do you develop from here? What can be improved from here? And just use that energy as a momentum to push you right up to Ford Field, and keep that going right on through. Don't let any of the energy that you've had stop or fall back or start to, filter away, but just keep that proactive energy driving forward. And from the attitude, like Juno just said, that you've shown over the past few weeks, you keep that, going deep into them. They're going to continue to grow, and it will continue past the season. That whole approach towards continued improvement that we want from our students day by day will continue to go. You're on the right track, without question.
All right. Anybody else have anything for the good of the order tonight?
Yeah, I'll do one more thing. That they were pushing a little bit earlier about, doing the blocks and staying with the basics and that kind of good stuff. And I started remembering some, back in the good old days. Maybe if you have like 3 16-count musical phrases in the show that are 16 count for sure, well, play that in the block, moving forward, moving to the side, and going backwards, whatever way you want to know. Whatever way you want to go, I mean. And this way you'll see when we're talking about, they don't have good initiation, they don't have good completion of phrases, because if they're in a block and they don't know when to move or shift at that 16 count, you're going to see it. And, and they're going to see it. And then hopefully they'll understand, okay, this is when I need to step off. This is how it works. Any kind of those little tricks that you can give them to help them along the way. I think Wayne gave a couple of good tricks, so hopefully you caught those. How to make things work a little bit more efficiently. And,
listening to the ensemble. I mean, I know it's hard, and people tend to they get a little myopic on their sections. But make sure you have someone. Maybe it's you. Maybe someone else can come in and just. I used to love bringing in Jim Prime Jr. and
love him,
because he has amazing ears, and he would always hear stuff that I wasn't hearing. And that's a very valuable thing. So maybe that's something you can have. Just bring in a friend, and maybe someone that you trust that has good ears, and they can hear something that or see something that maybe you're not getting. But I think listening holistically to it I know in talking to a lot of the music judges, they talk a lot about, I wish I could hear the woodwinds, and it's not only because the woodwinds don't play with the same presence as some of the other sections. It's they're often competing for space, right? Like where it wouldn't matter if on the brass feature if you had the tenor drums or maybe the bass drums, because they could fight their way through the woodwinds. I don't think they can. And to me, some of the best woodwind features I hear are there's nothing else going on except the woodwind, right? Just the woodwind. But sometimes there's that feeling, and I guess it's because you've got kids and we want to educate them and we want to give them a sense of accomplishment. So we feel like we got to write music constantly. So I hear a lot with woodwind features. I hear doubling in the keys, in doubling, and that could work. And it's kind of a cool color match. Except I'm going to give one color match that's my bane of my existence is the vibes with the flute. I won't go into all of the orchestrational things about it, but if you do use that one, please make sure the flutes are in tune. But so you might want to just look at, sometimes less is more with those. If you've been getting a comment like, I can't hear the woodwinds, it doesn't feel, going back to Chuck's comment, I don't get clarity here. There's too much going on. I can't find the main idea. Sometimes, just simplifying that stuff out. And again, going back to the concert band example, what's the main thing? Can you hear the melody? Can you hear the main idea in this 3-part textural situation? And then you balance the other elements, and especially inside the dome, that is crucial. And I think that's money right there for you, for sure.
I wanted to say thank you, Wayne. Wayne, you came up with an idea earlier that I never even thought about, and it makes so much sense. And that's the consideration of not probably just the cymbals, but anything else that's near the keyboards that are being mic'd near the boards, and the added pickup that they might have, and what that can cause, especially in a dome situation. That's a consideration that is probably so far down the level with many band directors, but it is so important and it can make such a drastic difference. Thank you for bringing that up, Wayne. That was excellent.
And this is a big rabbit hole we've gone down with electronics. I mean, it's so much so that when DCI hires someone at championships to sit at a table, and as the pits come in, they give available frequencies.
Great.
Especially on Saturday night. I mean, it's kind of crazy, right? With all the television cameras in there and other pits that are right nearby that have their stuff turned on, right? Because they're not waiting until they get on the field to turn the stuff on. And the amount of frequency and interruptions, I mean, I don't know where you're at with how much stuff you have like that, but it's a very, very deep rabbit hole. And we were talking earlier, it's, just like you hire a guard tech or someone in a front ensemble tech, a lot of groups, and maybe yours, has hired a sound technician, someone that's what they do. They know how to mix, they know how to edit, they know how to work an iPad with a soundboard. They understand EQing. That's the other thing that drives me crazy with those shotgun mics. No one EQs them, they just turn them on. And then just hope that a characteristic sound comes out of the one where the woodwinds are, right? So all of those things, I mean, you think about it, wouldn't you want a clarinet player to teach you clarinets? Of course you do. But so the same thing happens if you're in a world of electronics and you're going down that road, you need to get someone that knows that, right? And do it as much as you can do it. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying go out and do this and buy line array speakers and everything like that, shoot your budget in one purchase. But do what you can do and do what you can control. And if you feel like it's kind of getting away from you, then definitely speak to the admin about maybe increasing your budget to get a sound technician and not just someone to plug it in.
Exactly. Thank you. Good stuff. Great seeing you. Give my best to Chris.
Will do, Dave. Thanks.
Kim, do you have your hand up?
Yeah, I was gonna kind of talk, just suggest something like kind of how Gino was talking about as we're entering the end of the season and you're trying to clean some of the sets. And how he was talking about taking a couple and cleaning those. Something I would definitely suggest trying is cleaning halfway through. Don't start always at count one. I think this is what, week 6 or 7 for me being out at a show, and I noticed myself last night saying that a lot. That everybody knows where the initiation of count one is when they start phrases off. They know where the step off is for the most part. It's that count 4, it starts to get a little muddy. 5, it's get muddier, and then it's like I gotta hurry up and fix myself to get to where I need to end on this set. So maybe starting at count 5 and counting, like cleaning from count 5 of one set to count whatever 6 or 7 of the next set, rather than always going count 1 to count 8 or count 1 to count 16.
Absolutely. And I mentioned at the start about how do we get to the place where you enjoy this? How do the kids get to enjoy Ford Field rather than feeling freaked out? And I think part of it is just in your rehearsals, how are you? Does someone create levity? We're all very serious right now because we're trying to clean stuff and align stuff, and it can get tense and it can get very serious. Do you have moments of levity? And sometimes it could be just the silliest thing. Just the silliest thing. And that can create an energy with those kids. Like all of a sudden, the rehearsal just completely changes and re-energizes. So find those moments. You know what I'm talking about. You've experienced those with instructors. Find those moments. Sometimes you have to create them, right? They just won't happen organically. So you have to create them. Maybe plan it, like you plan your rehearsal. At this time here, I'm going to do this. We're going to do something silly about the moon, the way it looks, or the wind coming through, or something that takes us out of just doing marching band for a second, just for that little bit. And you'll see an incredible sort of demeanor change with the kids, I think, and plan those for your remaining rehearsals.
All right. Well, we've got 2 weeks left to, refine and get things ready for Ford Field. I hope everybody's enjoyed what we had tonight. Thank you, Wayne, for being here. Juno, Dave, and Blair for helping out. And we got one more week of these next Sunday, and hope to see everybody then. Wayne, thanks a lot.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks, you, everyone.
Good night, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Wayne.
Thank you.